So welcome everyone. I'm here with Tash Corbin, who I will properly introduce in a second. And we are here to talk about how to overcome visibility blocks or how to work with them to keep growing your business. And I'll give you a little bit of context about why we're having that conversation in a second. So Tash, welcome. It's amazing to have you here and have this conversation. So
I'm really excited for it. Yeah.
Yes,
thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. So if you've not met Tash before, Tash is a lean business mentor and startup specialist. She works with heart-centered business owners to get their business profitable fast and when they're ready to scale. Tash is the creator of the Heart-Centered Business Conference, which is epic. It was in Noosa in May. I went, it was amazing. Definitely check that out for 2024. Are there any tickets left, Tash?
She sold out, baby.
2025.
We have a wait list.
Guys. We do have a wait list, and there's the virtual conference in November. Tickets opening soon for that, I believe.
Yes.
And Tash is also the creator of the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Facebook group. I always get that wrong, but I got it right today. And it's got 30,000 plus, I think, people in it. I'm in there. It's an awesome community. Tash really does deliver on the heart-centered part of business. So it's a beautiful, beautiful space. And she's also my current business mentor, and I'm working with her inside her Leverage and Launch program. So welcome again, Tash.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm so excited for us to have this convo. It's going to be amazing.
Me too. And in case you've not met me before, I'm Lynn Hord. I'm a messaging specialist and an intuitive business mentor, and I help heart-centered businesswomen to articulate the power of their work, like really help people understand their transformation so they can reach more of their soul clients and amplify their soul's work in the world, really get that impact that they want. So that's me.
And you do it brilliantly, can I say? Like, it's spectacular to see the work that you do. So yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very kind. Also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of Australia, even though I'm not on there right now. I usually live and work there. Tash, I know you're in Noosa? No. Where are you living these days?
Yes, I am on the Sunshine Coast, but not Noosa. So I'm down the southern end of the Sunshine Coast, but it's all Gubbi Gubbi country. That's where I am today.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I normally live and work on the Burpie lands in northern New South Wales. So want to pay my respects to elders past and present. As Tash said, she's on Gubbi Gubbi land. So let's give some context. We're here today to talk about visibility blocks and how they can get in the way of growing your business. And particularly we want to talk about what can we do? What solutions can we find? And Tash and I are going to share some of our own experiences and particularly my own. So a couple of weeks ago now, maybe a month ago, so I was here in the UK and I showed up for one of our Leverage and Launch calls. And Tash is incredible at strategy, but she's also great at holding you when you are in the emotional journey of being an entrepreneur. And that day I think it was divine intervention, but there was like 2 people on the call, and which is very rare. And I was like, right, I'm going to tell Tash what's happening, because part of my goal or part of my intention with my 3 months travel that I'm on right now is to really up level myself and my business. And boy, has the divine delivered in spades, right? But there's a part of me that wasn't quite ready for that. So I showed up to Tash on the call and I'm literally like, the tears had already started. I use EFT. So I was sitting there, I tapped the entire conversation because I was really struggling with moving into that next level of visibility. There were some big moves I knew I needed to make and things I needed to, strategies to follow, asks to be made. And I was like, whoa, like it was clear. I knew what I needed to do, but I wasn't doing it. And I was my nervous system was all over the place. I was feeling really emotional, right? And that's what can happen when you have visibility wobbles. You can get really emotional. And just a caveat here, and you tell me what you think about this. So visibility wobbles aren't always rational. Most of the time, I don't think they are, right? They're coming from our subconscious, and they're our fears around what happens if we're more visible. I've worked with visibility specialists. I've had a client who's a visibility specialist, and there are so many layers of what it means to us to be more visible in our business. So in my experience, it's often like subconscious things that are coming out, and we don't always know what's going on. So that's my experience with like what's happening with visibility wobbles. What about you, Tash?
Yeah, I think that sometimes there's known and there's unknown. So sometimes, like for example, when I first started my business, I didn't like posting questions and having no one answer them on my Facebook page. So I would delete questions that no one answered within the first couple of hours. But I knew it was because I didn't want, especially my close friends and family, to see me try to start a business. I just wanted them to see me succeed. And so I didn't want them to see the effort. I just wanted them to see the success. So for me, it was quite obvious what I was doing and why, and it was quite a known. But then I would say that's probably 20% of what comes up for me in terms of visibility. And then the rest is just this, like, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. And when I get underneath, it's like, I don't want to be seen by certain people, or I don't want to be seen too much, or I don't want people to see this part of me, or whatever it might be. So it takes a little digging. 80% of the time I need to dig into it to realize that it's a visibility thing. But yeah, sometimes there are some knowns where it's like, yeah, I just really don't want that person to see, or I really don't want this people to see this part of me. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. So I've, some people talk about posting on your personal Facebook profile, and I know you're not a proponent of that, and I don't do it in terms of business either. But one of the reasons initially when I was debating about this was I didn't want all my school friends to see my posts. Like that was like my fear. I was like, oh, what are they going to think about me? Like, are they going to think I'm really weird? Like, are they going to be like, oh God, look at her trying to sell her stuff on like, her Facebook biz profile. And I was like, oh, and it was, so that was a known as you were talking about. And then as I've gone on in business, I really, like yourself, had to do some digging, and I have some visibility fears around getting bad attention. Like, so, and we'll talk about inner child. So you and I both, talk about like our inner children. And when like my most recent one before I was on the phone with you in tears earlier this year, when I was working on a visibility block, it was really, around my inner child. She was like 6 or 7, was just really afraid of what I call like bad attention. Like, so being more visible and getting that bad attention, which could be, trolls on your Facebook, it could be people in your DMs saying you're rubbish. Like, why the hell are you even like taking up space on the internets? And all of those are kind of like, deeper fears. So it's great frame for that, like the known and the unknown. So yeah, totally relate, to that one. And in your experience, like as a business mentor, is there any kind of theme, or it is really individual for people? Like, what do you notice, having worked with people for 10 plus years now? What do you notice? Yeah. When it comes to visibility, like how does it show up, and like what is often underneath it?
Yeah, I think that there's generally themes. There's themes. And I think also as we go through phases of our business, it shows up differently, or I think it gets a little less obvious sometimes as well. So, when we're first in startup, it's more that like I've never spoken about myself this way before, right? Having to big ups myself, right, and talk about myself and I'm amazing, right? We've spent our entire lives being told not to do that, and now we have to go out and do that. And so I think a lot of that is just about like learning how to speak confidently about yourself and your services. And I see those blocks show up in a bunch of different ways. People who don't show their face on socials, or they just don't want their business to have their name in it. The amount of businesses where I go and look at the About Us page and there's not a human to be seen, that like you would think it was run by bots because it's about the business, but it's not necessarily about the human. So yeah, there's sort of those themes in the startup of just becoming comfortable with that. And then like it is very individual. It's very unique to your circumstances and what happened for you as you became visible, as you grew up, as you became visible as a young adult, especially if you identify as a woman or non-binary, or you're not a straight white man, basically, right? If you come from a marginalized community, there's even more layers to the visibility stuff. And some of it is around like wanting, like the underlying theme for a lot of it is wanting to be safe. And so for people who have lived experiences or ancestral experiences of being is is not safe, it is far deeper and far more powerful and palpable than, let's say, like, you know, I talk to Davey about this stuff all the time, my partner, and, you know, things like, oh, I got up to do a presentation and I stumbled over a word and it was really embarrassing, right? Like that's very different to if I showed my face in certain things or in certain ways, like I was completely subject to abuse, or, you know, like there's absolutely huge differences there, and it's very unique to the individual. But ultimately, I think pretty much everything around visibility can come back to safety, right? And it's that sense of it's not safe. And the things that we talk about with the inner child, and like, it's like whenever I've got like someone yelling at me like, oh, that's not safe, don't do that, it's my 8-year-old self or it's my 9-year-old self. And that's that inner child of like, because when 8-year-old Tash did that, it resulted in something that felt unsafe, or it resulted in something that felt embarrassing. And so like, she just needs me to be safe. And so and like, whether it's logical or illogical, whether it's rational or irrational, whether it's conscious or subconscious, I also think it's important for us to acknowledge that our feelings are valid, right? Like, regardless of, I think sometimes when it comes to visibility stuff, regardless of how silly it sounds to you or how weird, like, oh, this is just minor, how you are feeling in that moment, or how the feelings that create that inaction or action are completely valid. The minute that you start trying to convince yourself it's not valid, or it doesn't count, or oh, this is just silly, I'm just going to white knuckle it through, I think we actually can make it worse. And you also basically are saying to yourself, your safety doesn't matter. Let's just do it. And so I'm a big fan of understanding what feels unsafe, why does it feel unsafe, what needs to happen here in order to create that sense of safety, and let's move on from there, rather than trying to just kind of push yourself through it.
And I think that last point in particular, I have seen enormously in myself, as well as, you know, my own clients, is that like, I should be able to just push through this, you know, I shouldn't need to like hold myself in my feelings. It's like that, like, oh gosh, you know, it's almost like a frustration or a dismissal of those emotions that are coming up. So it's just such a incredible point to recognize that our emotions are valid. And one of the things I talk about a lot now is kind of turning to face your feelings, because we'll avoid them. Like, you know, we'll dive into Netflix, you know, or, you know, some people have different other coping mechanisms, and it's just often avoiding strategies because sometimes it's hard to feel those feelings. Like, you know, it's hard to actually be with them, you know. And I've learned over the years to recognize it's one of my inner children, like going, hi Lynn, you know, I'm having a little issue with what's going on here, can you come and speak to me please, you know. And the longer I ignore them, the louder that they get. So I have learned, you know, just turn, face, hold, even if it feels uncomfortable, like really sit with that part of myself. You know, and depending on obviously what age it is, like giving it what it needs. So giving that inner child, you know, what it needs. And one of the things I've learned a lot is compassion. So reaching out for support, like I did with you, like showing up and going, Tash, this is what's happening, I really need help with this, you know, which is vulnerable. Like, right, I literally sat there and cried in front of you for a good half hour, you know, tapping away, going, you know, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I was visibly upset, you know, and that requires some vulnerability and courage to actually share that with people, whether it's your mentors, your friends, or, you know, whoever that might be. You know, and then actually giving yourself compassion, which was a thing that I struggled with for such a long time, because, you know, that's what for me, that's always what part of what's needed is showing compassion to that part of myself that, as you said, is trying to keep me safe. They're trying to say, this doesn't feel good to me, I don't feel safe here, Lynn, you know, can you come and be with me? So you know, that's certainly been my experience, and such an important thing for people to recognize. And because one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation was to normalize it. You know, visibility blocks, everyone has them. I don't know an entrepreneur who hasn't had it in some way, shape or form. And something we'll get to in a little bit is that, you know, it doesn't go away. Like, it gets less. You learn different ways to handle it. But, you know, I'll ask you to share, you know, the experience that you shared with me about, like, you know, a recent example where that still came up for you, not nearly as strong, but, you know, it was present. So also just wanted to make sure that everyone, you know, kind of takes that away as well, is that, you know, it doesn't necessarily go away, but we get so much better at handling it and being more kind of visible, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we were on that call and I was busily doing tracks down my face, you shared like a 3-step, yeah, it's not a system, but a 3-step strategy, process, you know, process, you know, with me. And would you have it share it now? I think it was so valuable about how to work with, you know, when you're having wobbles or blocks. So please share that with us.
For sure. So, and this really works for anything. Something I'll say just quickly about the visibility blocks, like they'll stick around. The thing that makes most sense to me is to think about it like money blocks. Like, you know how we have like that upper level of income, and then, you know, you think, okay, well, I've cleared all my money blocks out of the way. And then you have your best ever week. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute, this comes up again. And then, you know, the blocks that you had at 100,000 come up again at 1 million, right? It does. It just sort of, it comes up in a different form, or it comes up in the same way. So I think that that's really powerful to be able to visualize. It's like, it's just a certain level of visibility or a certain experience that denotes a level of visibility that means that it does keep coming back. But yeah, so whenever I come up with, I notice I've got a block, or I've got to the bottom of something, then I have my 3 steps that I go through. So number 1 is logic. So logic, without invalidating our feelings, what I do is just look for, like, is there a logical way that I can understand this better, or like work my way around it? So for example, I don't want to post on Twitter because I don't want to get trolled, for example. Well, from a logic perspective, I've posted 450 times and not got trolled so far. So that's not too bad. From a logic perspective, if I did get trolled, I'm allowed to delete and block. So that's cool, right? So it's even sometimes just having those logical solutions are enough to calm that sense of it's not safe, because if we haven't applied that, stopped, and tapping really helps. And also havening, if you've heard of havening, which is like just stroking the arms, and you can do it with your face as well. So similar to tapping. So when you're doing that and you calm down that kind of nervous system response or that panic, sometimes you can see the logical solution straight away. So I'll just delete and block if it happens. Or, you know, if I have things about I don't want certain people to see my posts or whatever it might be. So, well, if they do comment, I can block them from seeing future content if I want to, right? So sometimes there's just some logical things that we can do to create that sense of immediate calm. That's fine. I've got a strategy. A similar thing that I love around the logic is if it's an excuse, right? I can't do Facebook Lives because I've got a wonky eyebrow, right? Like, I love talking about eyebrows because I do have a wonky eyebrow. I plucked them very unevenly and they've just always grown that way now. And so, like, I can't go live because I've got a wonky eyebrow. Something I imagine doing is trying to explain my reason for not doing it to my grandmother. And I got this from Denise Duffield Thomas's Chill and Prosper, where she talks about like her relationship with her grandmother and like the things our grandmas would have done if they had the opportunities that we had. And so, you know, I think about like the women who've come before me in my family, and they're like, wow, like you can reach 35,000 people in your community and you can do this and you can that. And I'll be like, yeah, but I can't go live because I've got a wonky eyebrow.
Oh, it's such a good filter, isn't it? You're like, how would grandma respond to that, you know?
Yeah, right. So even just having to tell, like imagining myself having to tell my grandmother that I can't go live because blah, blah, blah. For me, it really helps me to see the logic versus illogical kind of piece of that puzzle. So step 1 is just play with some logical solutions. Step 2 is then to look for the mindset piece. So the mindset piece for me is usually something about like young Tash thinks it's not safe, or it's not safe to be seen. It's not safe to be my size. It's not, like, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so applying my favorite mindset tools to calm that nervous system response, to clear out some of the blocks or limiting beliefs. So my favorites are EFT, same as you. I love tapping. And journaling. I just love journaling about it, like clearing it all out. And I also work with a kinesiologist. And so they're kind of my favorites, but I've experimented with all of them. And I think whatever you find that works for you is perfect. So some people really resonate. Yeah. Some people really resonate with like EMDR, I think it is, the I one. I've had a go at that. Some people really like access consciousness, I think it's called. Affirmations. I prefer affirmations to affirmations. I find if I say affirmations and I'm in an inner child issue, for example, like it's safe for me to show up online, my inner child just goes, no, it's not. And I create a bit of an argument with myself. So I prefer affirmations where it's asking it as a question. So like, how is it so easy for me to show up online? Why do I feel so safe showing up online, right? So then instead of I do, no, I don't, yes, I don't, then it's just looking for the answer. So I feel like it puts us both on the same team. Oh, why is it so safe for me to show up online? Okay, well, let's go and find the answer to that. So I also love affirmations, but whatever.
And brilliant, by the way, because you're also getting your subconscious on board to look for the answers as well. You know, so as you say, putting them on the same, team. And affirmations, I'm the same. Affirmations haven't worked for me because there's a disconnect. Like if I don't actually believe that affirmation is true, I'm just like, whatever, as if. Yeah, so great. I love that. I hadn't heard the word affirmations, right? So it's a question. You're asking yourself a question.
Yeah, it's a question. Yeah. And I think that's why I love EFT so much as well, because I don't have to tap on like make believe. I get to say what's really happening and how I really feel, and I get it all out. And I am definitely a better out than in kind of person. So, I find like affirmations for me, and also that like sometimes people are like, no, don't say that. Like, I don't believe that. And they like cancel themselves kind of thing. I just find to me, it feels like just pushing the rubbish down and spraying a bit of perfume on it, and it's going to come back out eventually. So I'm like, nah, let's just get rid of the trash, right? We'll just get it out.
It's about saying the truth. It's the truth. Whether,
the truth is the truth.
The truth is the truth. Like if you're feeling crappy or if you're like, you're afraid, that is the truth. Like you may as well get it out there. I think that Joe Bloggs is going to probably come and, I was going to say something. We won't get there. So Joe Bloggs, on the internet is, going to troll me or whatever, and that's what you're afraid of. Like actually saying that out loud, and I call it just saying your truth, whatever that is for you, it's, completely valid and necessary in order to get it out there. We have to admit the truth to ourselves, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, whatever strategy works for you. Some people go and get hypnotized and do hypnosis stuff or NLP, whatever. So like this mindset kind of piece in the middle. And then the final one is then once I've done that, what is my strategy? And so it just allows me to then make a plan now that I've cleared it out of the way. And the reason why I love making a plan is because if I then don't do that plan, I know I've got to go back and start again, right? Like there's still something that doesn't quite feel right. There's still something that doesn't feel safe. And so, I like to put like just a short, sharp plan in front of myself, and if possible, action it that day so that I can like move forward. But if not, like sometimes things take a little longer, just keeping that in front of me for a few days to see, have we really shifted it or is there more to do? And sometimes I'll be honest, like I need to work with a practitioner, like I need to work with a tapping person or have a kinesiology session or something, because no amount of me going through that cycle gets to the actual bottom of it. I might get a short-term solution for a little while, but there are certain things for me that I think like I'm the kind of person who in talk therapy, I can talk my way out of anything, right? Like
Yeah.
I can justify anything. I've got the gift of the gab. It's fine. And I think sometimes I do that with myself as well. Like I'll be tapping and something will pop up and I'll be like, oh no, that's fine. And so I don't tap on it. And like,
Right.
that's the exact thing I should be tapping on. And
Tricky.
a
Yeah.
good practitioner will be like, wait, what were you just thinking then and you didn't say something? Or like, what did you say? We should dig into that. And I'll be like, oh, no, it's
Yeah.
fine. Like, well, let's
Yeah.
just tap on it anyway, right? So that's
Brilliant.
really helpful for me to have that external practitioner that I work with, especially when something's coming up quite a bit. Or I work with practitioners pretty regularly anyway, sort of more from a
Yeah.
maintenance perspective. But yeah, if I find myself getting tripped up on something particularly consistently, then I
Mm.
will book in a session and do that go a little deeper with that mindset stuff.
But I think that awareness is important, like noticing you're like, oh, I've been in this pattern for a while, or it keeps coming up, and you've tried to work on it
Yep.
yourself, getting help, whatever support you can to
Yep.
dig in and find out like what's going on here that I'm not seeing,
Yep.
or like I'm just struggling to be with, on my own. Like, so yeah, very,
Mm.
very important. And I don't think as we grow, because we're talking about, visibility blocks and growing our business, and this is just part of the puzzle. Like we need support in different areas in our business. Visibility is one of them. Like I don't know anyone who's made it through to where they are without some form of visibility support. Like, so I've hired someone and worked with them for 6 months to work on some really deeper stuff that I was like, yeah, this is really holding me where I'm at, because I was,
Mm.
various fears around visibility. So important to get the help you need and discover and use the tools that actually work for you, because different
Yep.
tools work for different people. So
Mm.
recapping so it was logic. First of all, it was logic,
Yes.
so actually look at, what are some logical things I could do in this situation if the thing I was afraid of comes to pass. Second one's the emotion. So look at, is that the word you used, emotion?
Mindset. Yeah.
Sorry, mindset. Great. Mindset.
Either.
So yeah, mindset. So looking into like, what's going on underneath everything and what are your thoughts about it? What are your emotions about it? So working with those and using the tools that work for you to do that. And then the third one was strategy. So
Yeah.
having a clear, practical strategy to help you move forward. And if you notice that you're not actually still actioning that, go back to step number 2 and go, okay, what's going on underneath here that I still haven't quite brought to the surface just yet? Did I
Yeah.
recap that? Have I got that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to say here, I truly believe that the best uncoverer of the blocks is action. And so it's all well and good to do all the work and be like, oh no, I don't have visibility blocks. Like I've totally cleared that all out of the way. Okay, then go and do a Facebook Live, right? Like, I think we can often convince ourselves that we don't have a problem anymore, or we've fixed it, or that's out of the way. But that's why I have strategy last, is because then, okay, well then what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
How am I going to actually take that action? And it's action that gets me to uncover it in the first place. So for me, it's like that sense of, I can believe in myself that I don't have a problem with sales, for example. But if I'm not doing the sales actions in my business, my
Mm.
actions are telling me otherwise. And so, really knowing what my key, most powerful actions are and taking those actions and noticing the ones that move across on the to-do list over and over again because they didn't get done, that's like you've uncovered the exact block that is most getting in your way right now. So yeah, this is not just an intellectual process. This is taking action and actually implementing some things and getting out there process so that we can get about uncovering the next level of blocks, because they're going to be there. So we might as well get to them and uncover them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also a big fan. I'm a practical girl, big fan of strategy like yourself. And when it comes to
Yeah.
messaging, I'm like, oh, okay, so have you shared that message? Oh, did you do that Facebook Live? Oh, how did you go putting that page up on your website? Did you get that done enough?
Yeah.
when I'm getting silence, I'm like, oh, okay, so how long have we been working on this? All right, so what's going on? What's really going on here, guys? What's happening underneath? So I know,
Yeah.
and having humor with it, right? So this stuff, it can be uncomfortable. it's not always easy to work through. So having support, but also, being as light with it as you can, so I
Yeah.
try and bring, when appropriate, like kind of bring some humor and go, oh, right, okay, so that's moved over on the to-do list. Oh, and I think, people appreciate that because you're like, yeah, because then you get to just look at yourself in a lighter way, a bit of humor, like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing again, aren't I? Ah, right. There's something else here for me to go and have a look at. Okay, Lynn. Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, it makes me laugh. So just one more thing I would love if you're happy to share. So, we talked about, when you're first starting in business, it might be the Facebook Live that kind of you're like, oh, I'm struggling to get out there. So right now where I am in my business, it's like kind of, making connections with people who are, bigger businesses than me. Hi, Tash, how you doing? Good to have you here on this interview, and actually reaching out and like having the, and like asking, for things that are win-win, so that's kind of where, my level of visibility, moving into my next level of visibility. And I know, you have yours as well. So I'd love for you just to share, one that you've had recently around like, oh, there's that visibility thing popping up again. And could you share something with us so that we can, because you're obviously, you've got a much bigger business. So what happens for you at this time?
Yeah, so there are certain things that I know are still like there's still some stuff to be undone from a more practical perspective for me, or some mindset stuff as well. So like for example, let's just say I'm not a fan of a lot of the common marketing strategies that are taught out there. And they all sort of stem from a certain little like cohort of salespeople back in the 90s. And so you can kind of trace their origins. And so one of the things that I'm very passionate about is consent-based sales and consent-based marketing. And so in order to help people to understand consent-based marketing and to highlight some of the dangers of toxic and abusive marketing strategies, I will unpick some of the marketing things that we've been taught by certain people, or certain very common practices that are taught, and help people to see why that's actually based on either like coercion or abusive selling strategies, those sorts of things. And so, and there are some very popular marketers and industry leaders who use these strategies knowingly or unknowingly, right? There's a lot of people who use them without realizing that's why they were taught to structure a webinar that way, or that's why they were taught to write a sales page that way. So knowingly or unknowingly, they're using those strategies. And when I first started talking about some of the more specifics, it felt completely unsafe for me to do that on my social media, for example, right? And like, what if someone tags that person and like, then like I'm picking a fight with the big boys, and that
going against the mainstream. Yes,
right. That felt so unsafe. So I only ever really talked in detail inside the takeoff program or inside leverage and launch or that kind of thing. So those people have paid to be part of my space. I know that like I can trust that. We have rules about don't go and share this everywhere else. And so I was able to confidently talk about that. And then I could see that I needed to bring it out sort of wider to my audience, but I just talk about it in the Heart Center community because that's a group that you have to get into. And so, and it's for women and non-binary folk only. So those big boys aren't allowed in my space. So I'll just talk about it in there. But then over the last couple of years, I've started to talk about that far more openly. And like, it's not necessarily a name and shame situation, right? That's
not your style anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And there's more of them using it than there isn't. So like, I can't just single out an individual really. But I do like that. Often people will talk about experiences with a certain person and they use their name or whatever. And I've become far more comfortable with that over time, but it still shakes me, right? It still gives me the wobbles to think like, am I going to pick a fight unknowingly that I just don't have the resources. It's not going to be a fair fight. And there is some logic stuff behind that, right? Like, especially in particularly like judicious kind of spaces, like in America, you
Mm.
see for everything, right? Like that's my perception of America. Sorry, Americans, if that's incorrect, but it feels that way. You've got more law shows than anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like there, that is a tactic that's used by businesses to completely shut down competition or completely shut down
Mm.
that kind of thing. Is like we'll throw so much legal stuff at you and so much legal processes at you that the cost of you having a lawyer is going to be like you'd be better off to just shut your business down. And
Yeah.
so yeah, there is some logic behind it, but the odds of that getting to that is pretty low. And I'm have confidence in some of the ways that I would be able to rectify that if something happened, or but
Mm.
yeah, it's like it it doesn't matter how big you get or how seen you get, there's another layer to it, right? There's always
Yeah.
something else. And so yeah, that like I find that like the more people that I reach, the more likely it is that someone's going to disagree or be like, that's not what
Mm.
this person said, or what, how's that like, so
Yeah.
uh, the things that scare me today, like they won't scare me in a year's time. And like
Yeah.
similarly, like the things that scared me when I first started, those
Mm.
things don't scare me so much today. Like I used to be like completely tied up in knots if someone friend requested me that I didn't know, and I didn't know how to say to them, like, my Facebook profile is for my friends and family only. Like, go away. Like, I was like, how do I even, like,
Yeah.
I was such a people pleaser, and still am. Like, my money archetypes, number 2 is connector and number 3 is nurturer, right? So I'm like all up in there,
Yeah.
like, don't lose the connection.
Yeah.
Um, and so, it was even just having unsolicited friend requests used to bring up some stuff for me about boundaries. And
Yeah.
then when I first started the takeoff program, and there's sometimes I'd have a student like kind of push the boundaries around trying to sell to all the other students or that kind of thing. And it felt so uncomfortable, like trying to nurture that person and keep the boundary and all those sort of things. But these
Mm.
days, like I deal with
Yeah.
that stuff pretty consistently. And so yeah, it's the big one for me in terms of visibility is definitely like I see myself as a very small player in this industry. And I know that sounds really odd to people who see me as a big player in this industry, but I absolutely do.
Mm.
And so I even linked this into my income goal, right? Like, I've had a goal to have $1 million year since 2017, I think. So 2018 was the first year that I thought, oh, I might go for $1 million this year. I reckon I might be able to get
Yeah.
close. And so, but I've never actually hit $1 million within a year.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I took most of 2021 off and I was recovering 2022, but now that I'm nudging up near $1 million this year, these fears of the big boys are going to see me are coming up again, because there's
Mm.
something like, it's just a number, right? From a logic perspective, there's
Yeah.
really very little difference between a $999,000 year and a 101,000. A 999 and a 1,001,000 year. Like, there's
Yeah.
very little difference between that from a monetary perspective, but energetically and from a mindset perspective, that is a huge threshold for me to cross. And
Yeah.
so I've even connected in that, like, fear of being seen with, if I don't make over $1 million, they won't see me. I'm still teeny, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so
Yeah.
wild to me that that's
Mm.
the threshold. But it's been really fascinating for me to see it doesn't just show up as a visibility block, right? It shows up as a money block.
Yeah.
For me in particular, I even had the same thing with like the heart-centered soul-driven entrepreneurs group getting too big. Like, I was deleting members when we were getting close to 1,000. I was deleting inactive people out so that we wouldn't go over 1,000, because I thought then it would just get too big and it would be too unwieldy and da da da. And then, but it just
Mm.
grew beyond what I could actually keep contained, and now it's 35,000.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's lots of different ways that it shows up, but that's a big one for me at the moment.
Thanks for sharing that, because it is always about, like, one of the themes we've been talking about. There's always an edge. There's always a visibility edge that we are hitting up against.
Yeah.
And depending on, how long you've been in business, what's going on underneath you, internally is what I mean there. It can depend what it is, but it's about, one of the things, I love about you is, so we all love your consent-driven, eye-opening things that you share, by the way. I know you use examples that happen in your life, and you're like, guys, this is the way not to do it if you want to be consent-driven. And that's really about, what I'm really hearing is, like, you're leading the way, and that's a whole other, piece of visibility, is like being a leader, like calling other people out, and you do it in the kindest, most compassionate, direct way, not direct, as in you do it with kindness and compassion, and you're not a namer and shamer, but that's, you leading the way for you and your community as well. So, that's a whole other, layer, and we could probably talk about that, in a completely other topic. So, yeah, great to recognize there's always a visibility edge, and no matter what size your business, you're always kind of pushing up against, something. As you say, it's like the same with money, visibility, and, in my experience, your message, like, the bigger you get, the more direct your message is, the clearer it is. Like, that actually brings up a lot of stuff for people on the inside, because, like, oh, I'm not hiding like anything. My message is clear and direct. And, like, you can see me, you know what I'm about. You're like, whoa, okay, that's a little scary. So in so many different areas of our business. So
can I add just one little thing in there as well? I also think that
keep talking. So yes.
I also think that it comes up as well. Like, one of the things that I think for me with this particular block is that if I can keep I feel like that my subconscious thinks, if I can keep myself below them, I'll never be seen as a competitor, right?
Right.
Even though in reality, we probably are competing for some of the same sales, right, between us. I have never, I'm someone who really values that, like, cooperation, not competition, right? There's someone for this person, there's someone for that person. And in our circles, that's absolutely true. So if people really resonate with working, like, we could call ourselves competitors, right? You work with the messaging and business mentoring and all that kind of stuff, right? So we could consider ourselves competitors. But in our circles, we understand that we are all contributing to a very similar conversation, and we all want everyone in our community to succeed. And so if people resonate with your work, then they should work with you, right? And if people resonate with my work, they should work with me. And there are people who work with me and you, right? Because we're all bringing something to the table. We're all contributing. And I don't see our space, the heart-centered community and beyond, right? So people who are heart-centered business owners, in the true sense of the word, we don't really compete in that way. And I think for me, that I've had very little issues with competitors in this kind of space. There have been a few things here and there, but I think I don't trust the big boys to play the same way. I don't trust them to play fair. And so I think also, just for me, I think that there's a great lesson in that, in noticing, like, what is it that makes, like, that pings something in us in competitors. So like, if you see someone who is a direct competitor, or, you do similar thing in your similar size business, and you're feeling a bit about it, there's always an insight as to why. So it might be like, oh, they're showing up so well and they're doing so well and and I wish I could do that, but I'm not, right? And it's like, so actually you've got a case of, oh, the I'll have what she's having, or the I'll have what they're having. Like, it's actually like, it's that jealousy, or that sense of is actually, I want to do that, I wish I had that. And so for me, I see that as, I'm now 1 degree of separation from the very thing that I want. So when a biz friend of mine hit the $1 million mark in her year just recently, I was like, oh my gosh, I know someone who's just crossed that threshold. I'm 1 degree of separation from that now. And so I see that
Yes.
as like it's possible for me as well.
Mm,
But sometimes it also just highlights for me the things where like I had a little worry that I wasn't doing something, or I'm doing something different, or I hadn't quite nailed something. And then when I see someone else nail it, it proves to me that there was something I needed to do, and I probably should
yes.
have done something about it earlier, right? So there's just so many hints and clues that we can collect from that, especially when we think about a specific person or a
Yeah.
specific business or a specific incident. So my extra piece of advice would be look for those things. Sometimes we have that ping of, oh, we say a nasty word about it, oh, such a bitch or whatever, like, oh, right. And then we go, oh, that's naughty. Like, oh, no, I love them. That's fine. Right. And we just try and we squash it.
Yeah.
Actually, like sometimes it's good to go to the dark side. It's good to just unpick and unpack why. Some of it
Mm,
is internalized misogyny. Some of it is like we've seen over the years, like you can't, like two women doing the same thing are pitted against each other,
that's
right? Your
right.
team Brittany or your
Mm,
team Christina. Most fans loved both of them, but the
mm,
media made us like choose a team and made like we
mm,
pit women against each other. So sometimes it's not even a conscious thing, it's come from somewhere else, or it's something that's programmed or we've seen in
yeah.
society. And so I think it's so powerful to unpack it and to look at it, because sometimes, like I've loved this from some of the more feminist creators that I follow. There's a big conversation at the moment about like women that you don't like, but you don't really know why. Right? There's just something about her. I just don't really like her. And unpacking
Mm,
that, and it often comes back to internalized misogyny, or it comes back to this sense of we have to compete against each other for the one
mm,
seat at the table with all the dudes, the Steves and the Ryans, like
mm,
it's that sort of feeling. And so those individual circumstances, don't shy away from them, right? Just turn to face them, as you said, right?
mm,
Just with
mm,
your feelings, look at your feelings. If you have
mm.
that kind of negative thing pop up, take the time to just have a little think about it and consider it, because it can reveal so much about what we need or what we want or what we wish that we had. And
Mm,
then you get to decide, well, do I want it or not? Do I really want it, or am I just jealous that they have it? And
yeah.
so you get to be far more empowered around what you strive for and what you want for yourself. And
Mm,
that it just means that all of those little negatives turn into this massive expansion of what is possible for us, as well as that clarity on what we truly desire. Yeah.
nailed it. This,
Mm.
and this is something you and I have talked about. So thank you for actually bringing that up, because it is a really important piece as women in business, particularly because
Yeah.
you're right. We've been taught, especially inside the patriarchy, to be in competition, whereas I also let you believe in collaboration. And you and I had a chat about this on that same call, and recognizing that jealousy or having a reaction to somebody who is either similar to you or doing similar work, or in a similar business, a can show your desire. And it's about, for me, really claiming that, like, I want $1 million business, right? And
Yes.
actually claiming that's what you bloody well want. Okay, great. They got it, as you say, 1 degree of separation, amazing. You're like, if they can do it, so can I, which I think was something that you reflected back to me. So it's that desire piece. And also
Mm.
for me, when I've had this experience before, it's recognizing that that person is, I kind of call it embodying like a trait or a characteristic that actually I need to be embodying. Like I need to be
Yeah.
owning a part of that. Like, so I remember back a few years ago, a friend, a peer, she was doing, better than me. And I was like, and I was feeling really frustrated about that. And I was like, well, what's that? What is she embodying that you're not? And I was like, she's taking up far too much space. And I was like, all right then, Lynn, and I turned that back
Mm.
on myself, and I was like, so are you taking up enough space? And I was like, no, I'm not taking up enough space. Like, I'm diminishing myself. I'm like, giving other people the limelight and not like actually claiming my own expertise and my abilities and my skills. So it was a real eye opener for me. Just going, all right, what is it that I'm not? What's triggering me about that person? And then that's what it was. I was like, oh, you just take up space. And I was like, all right, well, why is that a bad thing? And there was something from my past that was about, like, I was like, I had a relative, and I was like, oh, you took up too much space, and I had to diminish myself, right? But in business, we've got to take up space. We have to share our message. We've got to ask. We've got to make the invitations. Which is all about taking up the space. And actually using our voice and owning our expertise and our value, right? So it was I was like, it was like one of those, like, bing. I was like, oh, right, okay, so such a again, another valuable conversation and thing for us to think about is that when we're having that trigger, and I really believe this, if we're having a trigger on the outside, it's going to be a reflection of us on the inside. That's kind of the way I operate, even if it's hard pill to swallow, guys. Sometimes they are hard pills to swallow. You're like, oh, I'm feeling jealousy. And of course, we've been taught, don't feel jealousy. Like, you're a bad person if you feel jealousy.
Yeah.
But it's actually a really inspiring, activating emotion through the things we've talked about. If you're willing to look at something in that way and actually look at, okay, well, what is this saying? What is this? What's happening on the inside that I'm having this reaction? And what does it mean? Or what do I need to do differently in order to really catalyze and use this reaction that I'm having? Like, it's just so powerful. It's not happening to us, it's happening for us, I believe. And so, like, why is this happening? What can I learn? What can I do different in order to actually use this and really go for that desire and that thing that I want in my business?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the thing is that, like, and a lot of it, we label it as imposter syndrome, right? Or we label it as something else, as like, who am I to do this, and who am I to share this, and we've got all of these things that get in our way. And I want you, if you need any more motivation to deal with your visibility blocks, I want you to think about the person that comes to mind when you think about someone who has no problem talking themselves up, maybe like overstating their competence, and all of those flashy peeps out there who don't have substance behind what they're doing. And think about, like, if you don't take up the space, right? If you don't go out there and make the offer, if you don't go out there and make the sale, there's going to be some dude named Ryan or Steve. We've talked about the Ryans and Steves on my page, right? There's going to be some dude named Ryan or Steve who actually cannot help your clients, but believes because patriarchy that he'll figure it out and it's fine. He will have no problem taking that person's money. He will have no problem showing up and eating up that space. Like another, like that song that's going on Reels, like another white man with a podcast, right? Like, it's just like, my gosh. Like, and so even if you feel like getting over this visibility stuff it's all about you and it's centering yourself and you don't feel comfortable with that, I want you to think about all the clients that you could be helping right now. If they just knew you existed, if they just seen your message, if they just knew what your face looked like, all of those people out there, they need you. They need your help. They need what you have to offer. But they don't know you exist because their newsfeed is taken up with all the Steves and Ryans with their podcasts, talking about how women just aren't good at this stuff and taking their money, right? And so I think it's like, it doesn't even need to be about you. Do it for them. Do it for those clients who in your heart of hearts, you are able to really help them with that transformation. You're able to help them with something that they really want. They want to achieve something, and you are the very thing that will help them to achieve it.
Yeah.
But your eyebrows are wonky and you can't go live today. Like, that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves, is that it's not just about us. You don't create a business so that people can pay you money out of pity. You create a business so that people can pay you to help them achieve something that they deeply desire. And by stopping the visibility and stopping the growth of that business, you're actually telling the people who need you, I'm sorry, I can't help you because I've got to deal with all this stuff right now. I can't help you because I don't believe in myself. I can't help you because I'm worried that that random dude that I went to school with when I was 17 years old and had a crush on is friends with me on Facebook, and maybe he might see my post and he might think I'm uncool, right? Like that, to me, it helps to dissolve everything away when I remember that it's just not about me. It's not me alone who is benefiting from me being visible. I don't have a near $1 million business, and I won't have $1 million business because people pitied me enough to pay me $1 million. I will have $1 million business because people will have paid me to help them grow their business and to help them, show up online and attract and convert clients. That's why people pay me money. And so it allows me to make it bigger than myself, especially with the consent-based marketing stuff, right? Because then it allows me, like, if I can get through this, I'm going to make consent-based marketing the norm, not toxic abusive marketing. And then that also means that anyone who's being sold to is going to experience consent-based marketing, not toxic abusive marketing. Like if we, like that to me is such a huge, big vision. And that's what drives me to take the action, to uncover the blocks, to do and work through this, right? It will always be safer and easier for me to stay small and to stay hidden. And I could live a very comfortable life with my business as it is. And, serving the level of people that I serve right now. Absolutely, I could lead quite a comfortable life. But for me, the discomfort of uncovering and clearing those visibility blocks is less than the discomfort of living an unfinished life, right? Like it's it's uncomfortable to, in 2 years' time, still do your first Facebook Live on your to-do list. That also really sucks. It's uncomfortable to not achieve your goals. It's uncomfortable to know that you've got some magic inside you and not sharing it with the world. That's uncomfortable too. And so we get to choose our discomfort. Choose the discomfort of clearing the visibility blocks and being seen and moving through that in a way that validates your feelings and creates safety for yourself. So, you're not terrorizing yourself all the time, right?
No, we don't.
The discomfort of uncovering and clearing this stuff and connecting with your inner child, that can be uncomfortable too, right? Like there's a lot of stuff in that that's uncomfortable, but I choose that discomfort over the discomfort of looking back in 10 years' time and still not having hit my $1 million year, but more than that, still not having hit that tipping point of making consent-based marketing the norm. And so like they're actually both very uncomfortable when I think about it. And so I choose the immediate discomfort that's going to prevent the in 10 years time discomfort that will feel so much bigger and so much more sad. Like read Bronnie Ware's Regrets of the Dying if you need to be fired up on that, right? Like we have a discomfort level that we can choose, or a discomfort that we can choose between. And every time I'm going to choose the discomfort of doing the thing and working it out over the discomfort of unfulfilled dreams and letting the Ryans and the Steves of the world steal heart-centered business owners' money to teach them toxic marketing strategies that then don't want to use and that then don't work for them, and the women and marginalized people of the world being the ones who somehow make it mean that they're not as good at business or they're not cut out for this because they don't want to abuse people with their sales and marketing strategies. So I could keep talking about that, as you can tell.
Amen. And that is a yes. And thank you for sharing that fired up, share with us, because it's actually a great thing to finish on, is to helping people recognize that, growing in business, there's always different pieces that are uncomfortable. And as you just said, it's choosing which discomfort are you going to sit with, the one of like staying safe and being here, or the discomfort of facing, what it is that would allow you to move forward. And that one of the things that really supports our audience, which is heart-centered business women, is really being connected to, I call them your whys. Like, why are you doing this? What's your reason? What's your motivation? Like for yourself, your audience, and the world, right? So really being clear on those and using those as motivation to turn towards that discomfort that's actually going to help you grow your business and have the impact that you want. What a brilliant way to see. It's like you planned that, Tash. I'm finishing with a
Ribbon.
beautiful message there. Listen, thank you so much. This is such an important conversation, normalizing, visibility blocks, moving through them, different stages of your business. They're always going to be there in different ways. And also really having that talk around, like, what does it mean when you're being triggered or finding jealousy or, with people or things that are happening around you, and really using them for desire, like really getting connected to that desire and recognizing, like, what do I need to be doing to keep stepping up in my business? So thank you
Beautiful.
so much.